And okay, this hangout is now on air. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Chattering with Nicholas Vince and chattering about movies. Tonight we're going to be looking at both See No Evil, the first one, and Candyman, the first one. Before we get into that, I'm joined by Nat. Nat, please say hello.
Hello.
Hi, this is Nat, and this is Vicky. Vicky, please say hello.
Hi.
Thanks very much for joining. As I say, I'm expecting some other people will be joining us during the show, but that's fine. Before I start with this, we start talking about the movies, I just wanted to share some news with everybody. The first thing is that Barbie Wilde will be joining me at the Living Dead Con in Liverpool, England, on the 11th of October. It's a one-day event up in Liverpool, and they've also got a guy called Dominic Brunt who directed a very good zombie movie, an English zombie movie, a British zombie movie, and Dave Prowse from Star Wars, Darth Vader himself, is going to be there, so that is going to be proving to be a really interesting day, I think. I'm really looking forward to that. That's on the 11th of October. I just wanted to remind people about the Indie Horror TV Kickstarter. I'll put a link up on the video. That's going to be that's still carrying on. They can do with support, as can Bad Medicine. Sorry, Indie Horror is on Kickstarter. Bad Medicine, starring Barbie Wilde, who I was talking to last week, and Tim Dry, who I'm going to be doing the Luggage in the Crypt interview at a date to be specified. Those are up and running, and that's on Indiegogo, Bad Medicine. They could do with some support as well. Coming out on 31st of October, there is a new Indiegogo campaign starting for Borley Rectory, featuring Julian Stans and directed by Ashley Thorpe. This is one project I'm actually part of. It also features it stars Reece Shearsmith from the League of Gentlemen, and you may have seen him around. Reece has done some amazing stuff. He's a very nice guy, apparently. I've yet to meet him, but I understand he's a really, really nice guy and very talented. I haven't seen some of his work. That Indiegogo Kickstarter will be starting off on the 31st of October. I'm going to put in a link to a thing called Thunderclap, where you can show your support by, on the 31st of October, they're going to do a synchronized tweet Facebook post at exactly the same time. They're aiming to get 100 people just to broadcast at exactly the same moment through a thing called Thunderclap. I'll put those details on the YouTube and as well. So if you're comfortable with doing that, please join in. And my last piece of good news, which I'm really excited about, is that following on from the Luggage in the Crypt interview with Barbie Wilde, the Soska sisters have agreed to do this as well. So I will be interviewing them on the 28th of September, which is when Simon Bamford was originally scheduled. So I'm going to postpone my interview with Simon. Hopefully I'll be able to do it later. And we're going to be doing the Soska sisters. Yay! I'm very excited because they are obviously such talented ladies. And one of the reasons we're watch See No Evil is because they are doing See No Evil too. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but I'm going to be asking them the Luggage in the Crypt questions, and that's going to be on the 28th of September. More details of that to come, and I'll create the event tomorrow. Okay, so thank you very much indeed. We've now got 3 viewers. If you're on Google, please come and join us. Myself and Vicky will be talking about See No Evil and Candyman. So we're going to start with Nat. You've seen Candyman. What did you think of sorry, not Candyman. I'm saying Candyman. I mean See No Evil. The first one of these two. See No Evil. Nat, what did you think of See No Evil?
Well, it wasn't a movie I was interested in when it came out. It was the only movie I did because the Soska sisters were doing it. And then I went back and watched the first one.
Right.
And I thought the first of the early 80s feel of that era of horror films that a lot of movies perhaps try too hard to recapture these days, and See No Evil felt a lot more natural in what it was trying to be.
Which is just basically in fact, I was looking at the DVD extra, and Gregory Dark was saying, this is exactly what he set out to do. He wanted to kind of emulate or pay homage to something very much in the style of Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, and Halloween. He mentions Freddy, Jason, and Michael Myers. This was very much what he said. And you said you found it kind of natural? It wasn't trying too hard?
Yeah, I mean, it knew its influences enough to not try to or try too hard to prove to the audience that it knew them. It wasn't as self-referential as
Right.
some of the more metafictional slashers these days.
Right. And which part was there a particular sequence that you liked in the movie?
Um, just the overall tone, really, and I think most of the kill sequences in it particular threw back to really the mid 80s Friday the 13th and movies like The Burning and The Prowler. It
Right.
it fits in right beside those movies.
Right. Right. I watched it, and I watched it for exactly the same reason that you did, and I think my view of it is very much summed up in what the Susker sisters have said about it, that it is a movie of missed opportunities. Um, I possibly didn't enjoy it as much as you did. And then one of the things I found that didn't work for me was the fact, and I've just watched Friday the 13th for the first time this afternoon. I suddenly realized I'd never actually watched Friday the 13th, because when it came out, a mate said, "Oh, don't bother, it's just not that scary." But I kind of thought that was very, as I say, I watched it this afternoon. And one of the things that I found stronger in Friday the 13th than I did in See No Evil was that you don't really know who's doing the killing.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a mystery. They set up red herrings as to people. The murderer is wearing the same kind of checked shirt as the camp, the guy who owns the camp, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
So there was that kind of mystery and tension to it, which I thought was interesting, which I got less of in See No Evil. One of the things I really liked, though, in See No Evil was Kane. I thought he actually did a really good job. And I thought that there was that feeling of he was a child. Some of the facial expressions and so on, there was this huge man who was still a child at heart. So I did find that very interesting. I think what I think didn't work for me was the fact that you're introducing the characters via the little mugshot slates that are put in front of you. You've got the name, you've got the police, and what it is they've done, which were flashed up too quickly in some of the cases to be able to read who this person was.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of thought it's not really necessary. But I agree with you with the effects. Although again, there are a couple of effects where I thought, no, hold on, that person's supposed to be killed like this, but now you're showing me the body and they've died in a different way. But I thought, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It was very interesting. But so I'm really looking forward to what it is that the Soska sisters are going to be doing with it. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to what it is the Soska sisters are going to be able to do with this. Vicky, so yeah, I think that's what I really thought about See No Evil. I didn't enjoy it that much, wasn't that scared by it, but did come to watch Candyman which again I watched for the first time this morning, having read Clive Barker's The Forbidden when the stories first came out. Um, Vicky, you've seen Candyman. What do you think of Candyman?
Well, I'm gonna be a little brief. Lunch is ready for me, but I'll be back in like 10, 15 minutes. So
Okay.
I really liked it. You could totally tell it was Clive Barker with the horror and the romance aspects of it. And it, I thought it was a pretty good movie. Yeah, it was. You could tell it was like from the 90s with the clothing, but it had the horror, it had the romance.
Mm-hmm.
It was good.
Any particular sequence or thing that you particularly liked?
I really liked the relationship that was going on between Candyman and Helen. This was probably one of the few times where watched a horror movie and wanted the so-called monster and the final girl to get together at the end.
And in fact, there's one of the, you're absolutely right, is the kind of the romance of it. Nat, what did you think of it?
Well, I think, like, I thought See No Evil was fun and
Hmm.
silly, and I think Candyman is legitimately brilliant.
Oh, that's Vicky disappearing and leaving us for a moment. Yeah. Sorry, Nat, carry on again.
Yeah, I think Candyman is a brilliant, brilliant movie. I mean, it is a movie about the power of storytelling and the very idea that a story told long enough and believed enough takes on a life of its own. And the Forbidden itself is so layered and textured that the fact that the movie was able to capture any of that is a miracle.
I agree with you entirely. I think they did an extraordinary job on Candyman, even just from the opening sequence where you get this incredibly steady shot, what looks like a helicopter, I assume is a helicopter shot of going down the roadway, um, just looking at the roads and the cars and so on during the title sequence. Um, what I found particularly interesting was the music um, that is supplied by Philip Glass, and again in a complete contrast to Friday the 13th, which I just watched this afternoon, and See No Evil. Bernard Rose, the director of Candyman, was saying that he deliberately didn't want the music to be like horror movie music, where the music tells you where you're going to be, where you need to be scared, um, and that actually. And watching in Friday the 13th, you notice that there are a few of the scenes where the fear really is just because the scary music is on. There's less tension in the actual sequence itself,
Mhm.
but the actual music itself um, really amps up the tension there. So it was absolutely fascinating. I mean, I love Philip Glass's work anyway. What he did on Z and Two Noughts and the Draftsman Contract, etc. Just amazing scores, but and not what I'd expect to see in that. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it's very interesting. Um, and it was only done with no orchestration. There's no violins or anything, no horns. It's just an organ. It's just piano and organ, basically, which I found extraordinarily interesting. What do you think of Tony Todd as the as Candyman?
Um, well, I think the film may have worked. Like, the film would still be good, maybe if there had been another actor in that role, but it wouldn't be nearly the same
Mm,
without Tony Todd. Um, he brought something very classical to the monster. It was very much, more of a throwback to Christopher Lee and Claude Rains in Phantom of the Opera than more, characters that had immediately preceded it, like Freddy Krueger and those sorts of horror monsters.
Well, and he, apart from the hook on the hand, he doesn't look monstrous. There's no makeup
Hmm.
on, there's no mask, there's no makeup. He's just this very tall, elegant guy who wears, the long coat and has this beautiful, beautiful speaking voice. And as you say, he completely, he's not a lunatic. There's no rolling eyes or anything. And he has some great lines as well, which kind of reminds me of Pinhead a bit.
Hmm.
You've got these classic lines about, as you say, storytelling. I found another aspect I was interested to find out if you think the same. Is it real or is it just her? Is this a woman is this really a woman who's having a psychotic breakdown because she's become so obsessed with these stories that she's actually going, kind of reenacting what she thinks should be happening because she's always alone when the things happen. And it's really obvious that the police is this. Everybody thinks this is what it is. And I thought that was nicely played.
Hmm. It really, really was. I think there's so much room for questioning in Candyman that I like that it's left open. I mean, with the nature of the stories and the way things like Candyman came to life and the ending, you can even question, whether or not Helen was real.
Interesting. Oh, I'd not thought about that. I'd not thought about that. I kind of I hadn't thought about that idea at all. Why do you think questioning whether Helen is real in the very, very... I said, yes, sorry, I was only got as far as the bonfire. I know I see what you mean now. Yeah, no, absolutely. That is very interesting. But I think what I also really liked about it as well is the character of Helen. It is, and I think this is why Candyman is a better movie than See No Evil in many ways, is because, as you say, See No Evil is kind of it's schlock horror. It's stalk and slash. It knows exactly what it is doing. Everyone's kind of, it's almost comic book. It's cartoon. It's you're not really supposed to care very much deeply, expected to care very deeply about these characters.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in Candyman, we spend a long time getting to know Helen and her husband and her friend and what it is. And I was getting about 20, 30 minutes in, and I'm thinking, hold on, I've not seen a monster yet. This movie is called Candyman, and it takes a good long while whilst we really get to know Helen and her kind of obsession and the fact that she suspects her husband of having an affair with one of his students. I did find that absolutely fascinating. And I'm just going to take a pause from it. And Scott Wood has just logged a question to say, "Howdy, Nicholas." So I'm presuming that Scott Wood is watching us, but it hasn't actually joined us on the Hangout itself. If you are there, Scott, and you wanted to contribute at all, just by posting a question on the Q&A app or posting a comment at all, do please do so. Nat, what I think you very eloquently explained why you enjoyed Candyman. Who are your other favorite horror monsters, if you like?
Monsters, I always go back to Dracula because it's the most insanely open to interpretation in adaptations. I've seen there have been just about every different possible ways you can interpret that character on screen. There's been, Nosferatu. There's
Uh-huh.
the romantic sort of Dracula with um, Gary Oldman and the incredibly over romantic Dracula with Frank Langella, and you know, every possible angle you can take that character in. And at the same time, I love Michael Myers in the original Halloween because there is no character, and there's a blank slate that you just project your fears onto.
Right. Sorry, Vicky just joined us at the end of that, and so we got a little bit of sound. Vicky, I'm just going to mute you for the moment, and just so the comment you were making about about Michael Myers, and do you want to expand on that a little bit more?
Well, I mean, Michael Myers is a different sort of horror character because he's not a character, really, per se. He's a presence. He's, just a specter that, for 90% of the movie, lurks in the background.
Yeah.
And, it's just a complete blank slate. You have no idea what's going on behind the mask.
Which
If
is
anything.
Yeah. And he just keeps on getting up. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter what the hell you do to him. And then it's interesting, that there is that. We come back to Kane for a moment in See No Evil. There is something very unstoppable about him because he has this huge physical presence. And it's very interesting. There's a very interesting parallel between Dracula and Candyman because he is, as you say, there is something deeply romantic about him. Which is your first? Which is your favorite of the Dracula? And in fact, which first Dracula? Who do you immediately think of as Dracula?
Christopher Lee.
Christopher Lee, so the Hammer House of Horrors.
Yep. They were often silly and campy, but just the presence he brings to horror of Dracula, and I mean, even in his second one, Prince of Darkness, when he refused to say a single line that was written in the script and had no dialogue in the entire film, he still had an incredibly commanding presence in the film.
That's very interesting. I'd forgotten that about Prince of Darkness, and it does. I think the interesting thing is, and you alluded to it in Michael Myers, is that when these characters are mysterious, it actually gives them a lot more power. Not knowing the backstory of, for example, Chatterer in Hellraiser and Pinhead in the first Hellraiser actually gives them a lot of power. So when we come to the sequels, there is a definite danger when you start potentially revealing too much, because people like it that they don't know all the answers. It seems to me. Vicky's come back and join us, and I know that Scott Wood is going to come back. So, Vicky, would you like to? Let me just see if I can. Vicky, would you like to unmute yourself? I don't know if Nat was comparing Candyman, Tony Todd, to Dracula in many ways in terms of romance. What do you particularly like about Candyman?
Like I mentioned, it had like the familiarity of like all the things I like from other Clive Barker movies, so like Nightbreed and Hellraiser, where it combines that romance with the horror, but not too much, because I'm normally not a fan of romance. I prefer like horror, action, fantasy, all that fun genres. But the romance in there was enough for me to enjoy it, but still perceive it as like a horror movie.
Right. Do you have any particular sequences that you really enjoyed in Candyman?
Sequence. I felt that the very, very ending when Trevor chants Helen's name into the mirror, and then she comes revealing herself as the new Candyman.
Yeah.
Just like all the strobe lighting, Helen actually reminded me a little bit of Princess Angelique from Hellraiser Bloodline,
Right.
with like the shape of her head and like the sinister look on her face, but she still looked beautiful. It reminded me of the Cenobite Princess.
Right. Right. And I'll throw this one both out to both Nat and to Vicky. What do you think about bees? Having watched
Uh,
Candyman.
I was never really a fan of them. In fact, when I went to Disney World over the summer, I actually got stung by one. So that wasn't very fun, especially since we were at the other side of the first aid station. Plus, now with this new little system in place, where like all the rides, we had to go on one ride before we could go over to the first aid station. Fortunately, though, I learned that I'm not allergic to bees.
Unlike Victoria Madston, I got the name right. Central actress, the lady who plays Helen in Virginia Virginia Madston, who is allergic to bees, and she was saying that they had to have medics at the side of the set ready to go,
Mm.
just in case she did get stung. I found that the sequence with the bees absolutely extraordinary, because when I was watching it, I'm thinking, hold on, surely they must be doing this with prosthetics. But no, they did it with real bees. Apparently real bees are less than 24 hours old. They're only 12 hours old because they can't sting you as much. But I believe Tony Todd did get stung at least 3 times because they actually put a handful of bees in his mouth,
Hmm.
um, in front of it. They put a mouth guard in first, and they then put a handful of bees. To me, that is extraordinary, that an actor is willing to go through that.
Hmm.
Uh, Nat, what about you? What's your favourite sequence in Candyman?
My favorite sequence in the movie would probably be the first, probably the first time that Helen actually sees Candyman in the parking garage, and the entire movie feels shot like a dream sequence. The entire scene feels like a dream sequence, where it's very hypnotic because she was hypnotized, and
Sorry, just squeaking there because he's like, yeah, they hypnotized an actress. um, that is, and it's that classic thing of it was daylight. That's
mhm.
unusual in a horror movie, that when you actually finally come to introduce your uh, your monster, you. So I'll just put this focus back on me for a moment. Uh, when you actually introduce your monster, the first thing you see is that he's got very nice shoes on,
Mhm.
um, trousers, and the hem of the long coat with the fur on it that he's wearing. Just strolling, not even particularly menacingly. He's just strolling across this car park toward. You've got they've got this wonderful voice which they obviously manipulated whilst they were doing it. That is a great sequence, isn't it? That you can actually introduce your villain of the piece, if you like, with um, in daylight, and there's this wonderful long shot against the skyline of Chicago. That's extraordinary. I think the other creepy thing I think about Candyman is the fact that we've got um, it is urban, and as Nat has said, and the real power of this movie is not the claustrophobia that you expect in so many things, because she sees it's all big open, big open spaces. Whereas in Candyman, it relies on a lot of the claustrophobia and the labyrinthine hotel that everybody's trapped in. They are all trapped. It is a monster house movie. Everyone's trapped. They're trying to get out. Whereas in Candyman, you don't get anything of it. You don't have the kind of the horror movie giving you the scares. An extraordinary piece of work. And I was thinking this, when I was watching it, Victoria Marsden. I don't know what I'll need to check on IMDb what awards, but I'm thinking this is actually more than a horror movie. It's a psychological thriller, and kind of think, why isn't it getting Oscar nominations? Because it's beautiful, it's just beautifully shot, extraordinary thing. I'm just going to take a brief here, and I'm actually going to wrap this up fairly soon because I said this hangout was only going to be half an hour rather than the usual hour one because we're just talking about these two movies. But Scott, here's from my views, Tony Todd. I personally believe that Mr. Todd brought something to the character of him, not only romantic as Nat stated, but he had something that I had not seen in films for a while. His class, unmatched by many. I think that's absolutely true. You can tell that Tony Todd is a Shakespearean actor. He has this wonderful stage presence. Cool. So, as I say, the intention of this was just to do a half-hour hangout whilst we talked about movies rather than my normal hour. So I want to thank you both. Were there any other questions or any other thoughts that you wanted to add in, Vicky, before I shut this down?
Nothing really, other than when is the next one happening?
Well, we've definitely got the one on the 28th with the Soska sisters. I'm going to try, and I'm going to be away the week after next. But definitely on the 28th of September we have the Soska sisters, and that will be the normal hour, and that will be the luggage in the crypt.
Mm-hmm.
I am putting together the schedule for the rest of the year. As I say, Simon Bamford will also be joining me, and Tim Dry will be joining me at some point. I'm also going to be doing more of these movie ones. I'm particularly interested in seeing Horns, the Daniel Radcliffe, Joe Hill movie. That's coming out at the end of October. So I suspect that'll be sometime in November we do that. I promised people that we'll also do a review of Nightbreed, the director's cut. Again, I won't be getting to see that until the end of October, so again, that'll be happening sometime in November. But I'm open for suggestions as to which other movies, because I really enjoy these conversations. And hopefully get some more people on board to come and join us. Nat, what about you? You got any final thoughts or anything else you wanted to share or ask?
Final thoughts. I think the bees in the mouth should have been Tony Todd's Oscar clip.
Yeah. I agree with that entirely. That would be absolutely right. Now, I just want to thank you very much indeed for your contribution. Vicky, I'd like to thank you again very much indeed for your contribution. Scott, sorry, Scott Wood has been watching us, but I believe is having his meal now. Guys, that's been really interesting. It's been very interesting to hear your views. I think we're all agreed that we prefer, of the two movies, we probably prefer Candyman over See No Evil, but See No Evil is fun. If you want to see people, it's got some very effective sequences in it as well. But we're really looking forward to See No Evil too, because I think what the Soska sisters are going to do with this will be absolutely amazing. Guys, thank you very much indeed for your time. You've been chattering with Nicholas Vince, and we've been chattering about Candyman and See No Evil. Take care, guys, and have a really good evening, and I'll hopefully see you soon. Take care.